Welcome back to the Clay Kane Show on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, where talk empowers and becomes action. I'm looking forward to our next guest. Last week, we had on White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, and it is an honor to have on the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Last time I spoke to you, you were running for president, and now you were doing great work as Secretary of Transportation. I want to start here. This is an ongoing joke among my listeners here at the Clay Kane Show. I'm a very nervous flyer. I always talk about it, but I do it. But all jokes aside, we heard about the Alaska Airlines flight that took off in Portland, Oregon, and the door plug and so on. And it makes me even more nervous to fly, Secretary Buttigieg. And, airline issues, delays, cancellations. I don't know if you have any additional insight on that incident, but what do you say to people who are just getting more flying anxiety? And that incident, it makes people even more uncomfortable and stressed with flying.
Well, of course, I understand what you're saying. The day after that happened, I was flying with, Chas and I were flying with our kids. And as I was sitting on a plane with my 2-year-old son next to me, next to the window, like a lot of us, I think I imagined, what would I do if I were in that situation that those passengers went through? But a couple of things are important to remember. First of all, thanks to the excellent work of that flight crew, everybody on that aircraft got off of that aircraft and was not seriously injured. Secondly, that flying is the safest way to travel in the United States. It doesn't feel like that should be the case because you think about just how crazy it is that you're in a metal tube going at nearly the speed of sound, thousands of feet above the surface of the ground. But it's true that it is the safest way to travel, and that's true for a reason. And the reason is an extremely high standard of inspections, rules, regulations, so that even when there's an incident like this, it is national news. Unfortunately, we don't treat auto safety the same. I think we should. If it was headline news anytime there were a close call in a car crash, we wouldn't be living in a country where 40,000 people die in car crashes. That's another conversation for another day. What we are doing right now is grounding every one of this type of aircraft with this type of configuration until every single one of them can be inspected and determined to be safe. And that's the kind of high standard that's made it the case that air travel is the safest way to fly in America. So I definitely get it. It's just not something that, sitting in a chair in the sky is not something that human beings have done for most of our existence. It's not a natural thing. But no, as I know, every time I'm getting on a plane, especially every time I'm getting on a plane with my children, everything and everyone who has gone into building up that safety record that we never take for granted.
Thank you for that. So I want to talk about the infrastructure bill. One of the things when I hear people call into the show and say, well, what has the Biden-Harris administration done for Black communities? I bring up the infrastructure bill because there are millions of dollars that are going into cities like Philadelphia, where I'm from, or Detroit, or even Jackson, Mississippi, right? So if you could break down two key things, and we know it helps all communities, but just with this community, specifically, if you could break down two key things, what will the infrastructure bill do now in this moment, within this year or so? And what will the long-term impacts be of the infrastructure bill 5 to 10 years from now, especially in Black communities and Black districts?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to break it down. And the long run payoff is better infrastructure in every form, whether we're talking about transit, buses and trams and trains, whether we're talking about airports, just roads, bridges, and tunnels. For example, to take Philadelphia as an example, we awarded a $78 million grant for work on Roosevelt Boulevard. This is not just a look and feel issue. This is a safety issue because Roosevelt Boulevard has one of the highest crash rates in Philadelphia. A lot of crash-related fatalities there. And so the improvements that we're funding across a 12-mile stretch of road are going to improve safety as well as accessibility there. Across the country, we're seeing examples like that. Matter of fact, we got 40,000 projects, and a lot of them are coming to Black communities that have been crying out for investment for a long time. I'm thinking about Buffalo, where the Kensington Expressway is a piece of infrastructure that divided the community. And now we are working to basically deck it over, cover it up, put new land on top so the cars can still move, but it's no longer dividing people. We're doing a similar project in Detroit with I-375. So the funding is coming so that 5 years, 10 years, or maybe even 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to be experiencing better, safer roads. But to your other part of the question, what can we expect now? What we're getting more and more of right now is the jobs working on these projects, right? Even if a bridge is going to take 3 years or 5 years to be done, right now, there are jobs working on that. And we're working to make sure that more of the businesses that participate in those contracts and more of the workers that get good paying jobs on those projects come from communities that have been excluded in the past. And look, we know that Black-owned businesses and Black construction workers did not have the same level of participation in those good-paying construction projects from infrastructure efforts of years past, like building the interstate highway system. We're doing it differently this time, going out of our way to make sure it's fair, inclusive, and that more workers and businesses get a chance to be part of this.
Yeah, that's one of the great things that I heard is that with the contracts coming with these via the infrastructure bill, you're specifically making sure that Black small businesses get access to those contracts. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, we set a goal, first of all, for the direct contract dollars that come out of our department. So anytime the U.S. Department of Transportation is doing business with a business in order to deliver on our mission, that we increase the level of participation from those who've been excluded in the past. We set a 20% goal for small disadvantaged businesses. We beat that, and we're looking at how to be even more ambitious. And that translates into billions of dollars of value. The other thing we're doing is the dollars that are going out to the states, to communities, we're making sure there are ways for them to be sure to include more people. For example, I'm looking out the window, even as we speak, at the Frederick Douglass Bridge here in Washington, D.C. It connects the 6th and 8th wards in a way that hadn't happened before and is really important for the community. That bridge is partly the result of a local hire preference, which used to be impossible under the rules and regs of this department for a lot of projects. We're now actively encouraging local hire. That means that a contractor or a project sponsor should be looking for people who live in the area where the project is being built. I saw the power of this approach in LA, where there's an initiative called Hire LAX. They had a project labor agreement to make sure that more of the workers who got to be part of the renovations there actually live in the zip code where LAX, that major international airport, sits. And that's a really economically challenged zip code. It was one of the most moving experiences I've had to sit with these workers, some of whom had been making pretty much minimum wage jobs, some of whom never thought they'd be able to participate in these kinds of good paying jobs, some of whom had contact or involvement with the justice system that they thought would derail their lives forever. And now they're buying homes. They're getting ready to be able to pay to educate their kids with these good paychecks that they're getting. And most of all, they have this pride in the work that they're doing. We need to make sure that we're encouraging that in every part of the country. And I think, look, we're already seeing data that the Black-white wealth gap is down under President Biden. I believe the proportions of this infrastructure law, $1 trillion infrastructure investment, are such that if we get it right, economists in the future will look at the 2020s and say that this is part of why those Black-white and rural-urban wealth gaps started to close in the 2020s. But we got to work hard to make that happen.
Sure. May I just add, you mentioned Frederick Douglass Boulevard. I remember your Douglass plan when you were running for president, and you talked about infrastructure in your Douglass plan. I just want to shout you out for that. You went into detail with infrastructure in your Douglass plan. Just really interesting.
Thanks for remembering that. I know not everybody was picking through the policy details of our.
Oh, yeah, I loved it.
But this is something we really care about here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. If you could just explain to the audience a little bit of how civics works, because I will tell you, when I first heard this infrastructure plan, and I love to admit when I'm wrong, Secretary, I said, it's not going to go through. Biden's not going to get this through. I support him, but there's no way this is going to happen. And he managed to get it through. This is really a crucial piece of legislation. Can you explain how this administration managed to get this plan through, and now some Republicans are trying to take credit for it. Now they're excited about it. But I try and tell people, Congress, how is this able to happen? Because this is a big win, and folks forget about the process sometimes.
Yeah, look, you were skeptical that this could get passed, and you weren't alone. I mean, a lot of the smart money in Washington in 2021 was saying, this is all kind of happy talk, but it's not actually possible to do this, especially to do it on a bipartisan basis, and that's a big achievement. Look, we couldn't get any Republican votes to join us on the climate bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. We didn't get any Republicans to support us on capping insulin at $35 a month, but the president was able to get Republican votes to help us get this infrastructure law done. I sat with him in the Oval Office as he did what leaders should do, but sometimes don't remember to do, which is a lot of listening, bringing in people from both chambers and both sides of the aisle, Democratic and Republican senators and House members, hashing out the details. Nobody got everything that they wanted. It was a result of that kind of back and forth, give and take, push pull compromise. But the result was something that you're right is so successful that even the House Republican members who did not come along, who voted no on it, seem to be first in line to celebrate when a project gets done, because these are good projects and they're not Republican or Democratic projects. When we get something done that's going to make a road safer or fix a bridge or get rid of a railroad crossing that's been a community headache for decades, that's not a Republican or Democrat thing. That's just good policy.
Last question before you go, a bit of a broader question. I would tell you, as a Black man, as a gay man, I am really disturbed by the GOP right now. I cannot imagine a GOP win in 2024. I don't know if the country will be able to survive it. What do you say to people out there who have some fear right now? And it's not just a regular election. I mean, we have presidential candidates. They can't even say slavery. The Civil War was slavery. We have other candidates. We have the governor of Mississippi who made April Confederate Heritage Month. We have a war on trans people. It just feels like it's wars of ideology, not even wars of policy. Yeah. As somebody who's in there working with people on a bipartisan basis, what do you say to me or my audience who they have some fear right now and they're trying to get past the fear to ensure that we win?
Yeah, well, first of all, I get it. And if I'm choosing my words carefully, it's only because I can't talk about campaigns and elections while I'm sitting in this office. But what I can say is that the president has been extremely clear, both with words and with actions, that hate has no home in this administration and should have no harbor in this country. And this is a country with a past that we can't deal with by just papering it over, let alone making excuses for it. It's a past that the best thing about this country is our ability at our better moments to confront that past, to come to terms with patterns of exclusion, whether it's white supremacy, exclusion of LGBTQ plus people, or other forms of discrimination and harm that have been partly but not completely overcome. And we know that the journey needs to continue, that it has to be forward, not back. People are fearful because they have been given very good reason. We have been given good reason to worry. Things are happening that are outside the scope of normal Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal House, Senate politics. At least they should be. They should be beyond the pale. They should be something that nobody from any political background would tolerate, and they must be confronted, whether it's making excuses for or trying to talk about the bright side of slavery, or whether it is trying to move the ball backwards on anti-discrimination in this country. That must be named, confronted, called out. And to me, that's not a campaign thing or a partisan thing. It is just right and wrong.
I want to thank you for coming on. And I want to also add, I don't watch Fox News, but when you go on, it is just masterful. I don't know if they invite you on. Do they invite you on anymore, or they just stop?
Not as often as they used to, but I'll go anywhere with a message that I believe in.
I really appreciate that. Once again, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Same here. Really enjoyed it.
All right. I am grateful for the Biden-Harris administration bringing on folks to talk with us, to talk to the Urban View audience. In this early part of the year, we had Karine Jean-Pierre last week, now Secretary Buttigieg this week. So that is really good and really important. The work continues. All right.